Hey guys, we're back with another episode of the Disruption Podcast. It's your boy Manuj Agarwal with your co-host
Ludwig Arroyo. What's up, everyone?
This is gonna be the last time that we do that.
Okay.
We're gonna have to change it up next time.
Yeah, I'm with it.
Yeah. Do you have any ideas?
I don't think we need to introduce ourselves on our podcast, right?
Not everyone knows who you are. I mean, not everyone knows who I am.
Next
either.
time, maybe we just record a separate intro.
Okay.
And that's the same intro for every podcast.
So I think today's guest definitely needs an introduction because this is his first time being on a podcast.
That's right.
And so
Popping his cherry today.
I have another fraternity brother. I just have a lot of successful fraternity brothers, man. I don't know what to tell you. But this is a man who's carving his own path and getting ready to disrupt in an entire space. But it was something that was so different from what you and I are experts in, Ludwig, that we were like, we have to get you on the show. We have to let the world know about the things that you're doing. So, guys, it is my pleasure to introduce you to Dr. Agarwal.
Okay, there's some applause. That's nice. Yeah, thank you for
Do you go with the full name? Do you just go with Dr. Agarwal? Like, what do you prefer?
I mean, I've been called many things in my life. I think professionally, Dr. Agarwal would be nice, but for the podcast, just call me Manuj.
Manuj. Okay.
Yeah.
So, let's tell everyone at home, about Blue Wellth and what it is that you're doing over there. And, I mean, this is a new venture, so I don't know if you even have, like, a media 30-second rundown prepared yet, but...
Yeah, I mean, I'll give you a brief rundown. So, first of all, thank you for having me on the show. It's great to have a platform where I could talk more about this, this topic that I'm really passionate about, and I think applies to every living being who wants to live a full life and a longer life. So, in a nutshell, Blue Wellth is a bespoke longevity and rejuvenation medicine practice.
Yo, this man came prepared.
Yeah.
He's got this ready. Okay.
He's got the resume.
I saw the hands go into the chakra position. I'm like, okay, keep it going.
Yeah, just get into my zen, So the goal here is to offer bespoke care one-to-one basis for men and women who are seeking to prolong their longevity.
Interesting. So, one of the first questions that come to mind for me is there an age that too early to start thinking about life longevity?
Good question. It's never too early to start. The analogy I'll make is like your investment account. The earlier you start making investments into, say, your retirement or a personal fund for your portfolio, the more it'll pay in the long run. So
Gotcha.
The earlier you start, the more you benefit from the principle of compounding.
Got it. So let's take it back. Let's start from the beginning. Where'd you go to school? We understand that you started in oncology, right? Mm-hmm. So let's talk about the beginning and set up your resume for the people that are listening.
Sure. So I'm born and raised in New York, Queens and Brooklyn. Went to high school in Brooklyn. College was upstate New York. And then I took a brief stint from education, worked as a patent examiner in D.C. And that's where Ankur and I actually got a little tight. When he was undergrad, we would link up in Baltimore or D.C.
Yeah, I don't think we can talk about how many patents Manuj happened to move to the top of the list for me during that time frame. But it's always nice having a brother in the patent office.
Of course.
That's right. So I think, from a younger age, I learned more about, kind of thinking outside the box and how people really, preserve and think about intellectual property. I did that for many reasons. One was to make sure that medicine really was my calling, to see if I got a job and I was happy with the job. And even though I liked the job, it wasn't quite my passion. So decided after that to go into medical school. So I went back to Brooklyn, did my medical school at SUNY Downstate. And then from there, did an intern year in internal medicine in Long Island and back to Brooklyn for residency. During residency, I had the opportunity to go to many different institutions. So what was nice about my program is that they recognized what they were strong in and what they lacked. So I was able to go to pristine institutions like Memorial Sloan Kettering, and which was back then another institution called Beth Israel, which is now part of Mount Sinai. So I had a pretty diverse experience. And then from there, took a job in Ohio. And
oh, wow.
After a couple of months, I was like, what the F am I doing in Ohio? So decided to leave, came back to the Northeast, worked for a couple of years at the University of Maryland, then over to Penn. And all these years I was working as a radiation oncologist. So for folks who are not familiar with radiation oncology, it's a field where we treat patients primarily with cancer with radiation. So radiation can be given either from the outside using a big machine, or radiation from the inside using a surgical procedure where you put radiation directly inside a tumor.
Mm. How effective is that? I would assume it's more effective to do it internally.
It's a good question. So radiation was actually one of the original forms of treatment for cancer. So you rewind time all the way back to the days of Marie Curie when they first discovered radium. At that time, one gentleman had put a radium source in his shirt pocket and just went about his day, and the next day noticed he had a rash. And they said, oh, this thing might do something. So they took that same thing and they put it on top of a skin cancer, and the skin cancer went away. Mm-hmm. So the first documented cure with radiation occurred over 150 years ago. Chemotherapy, as we think about it, really didn't come about for at least another 100 years. So radiation was the mainstay. But going back to your question, things can be more effective when you put radiation directly inside of it. That's called brachytherapy. That's another business I'm actually working in. And there's also external radiation. In terms of effectiveness, it does depend on the stage in which you find something. Radiation is not used for everything. But going back to longevity, our goal here in terms of cancer, for someone who wants to live a long time, goal number one is do not get cancer. Mm-hmm. Goal number two is if I get cancer, I need to get diagnosed as early as possible.
Early detection, yeah. We've heard that before. I'm so excited about this podcast. Like, this, definitely one of the more intelligent guests that we've had. So I know that I'm going to be smarter at leaving this podcast today.
I'm so excited to talk to someone that's not Ludwig. You know? It's just such a nice change in my day.
We spend all day talking to each other, so it does help when we have someone else to talk to. Right. So much to learn, so much to think about when it comes to science. Oncology. How long have you been an oncologist?
So 2010 is when I graduated medical school.
Okay.
So fast forward now, it's been almost 14 years.
So working in oncology, you're working with cancer patients. Mm-hmm. Tough job, right?
It can be, yeah.
How does your experience in oncology lead you to become someone that's thinking about Blue Wellth and the Blue Zone?
Yeah. It breaks my heart. You know, oncology can be tough. And the way that I operate and being an effective doctor and oncologist is like being an effective friend, in that you give enough of yourself where the person realizes and appreciates the gift of your presence and how much you give in terms of your heart, being heart forward. But I think where some people, you know, fall back is that when you give too much of yourself, you can burn out, or you can get your heart broken too. And as a result, you probably, you've experienced time with physicians. You could have someone who's a bit, not as invested in your health, and that might be, a mechanism to protect themselves. So I've always been someone that kind of walked that fine line pretty well for the most part. And I think as a result, patients appreciated that. But it really did break my heart when there were stories of patients that really should never have gotten cancer to begin with. I mean, no one should get cancer, right? Like it's a terrible diagnosis to have. And of course, some hit you harder than others. But there were so many times that somebody came to me with cancer that didn't have to happen, either because of lifestyle choices or because they were just picked up way too late. And on the flip side, once you're done with cancer treatment, it's almost as if the institution just kind of sets you free and said, you know what, you're great, you're done, don't worry, come back in, live your life the way you want to live, and we'll help you out when you come back.
Is all cancer preventable?
I wouldn't say all cancer is preventable. The latest data suggests that approximately 50% of cancer is lifestyle related.
Wow. So there's the obvious ones, right? Smoking cigarettes, lung cancer, chewing tobacco, you might get mouth cancer or whatever. But what about something like a prostate cancer, or are those, would that be considered one of the types of cancer that's preventable?
For everyone at home, I'd just like you guys to know that Ludwig is over the age of 40, and this is a real concern for him.
This is
now.
personal for me, man.
And I don't know if Manuj brought his gel today, but we can get answers if you really need it, Ludwig.
It is personal for me. Yeah, absolutely. I am over 40.
Yeah.
I don't know if we needed to share that on a pod today, but thanks.
I mean, the people should know. I'm 38. Okay.
I'm 28. Thank you.
At one point. Yeah. So I'd say that everyone should have some concern about cancer. It shouldn't be overly concerning to you, but anyone at any age should think that, what can I do to prevent this from happening to me? I'm over 42 and I think about that. I'll tell you that prostate cancer shouldn't be your primary concern in terms of cancer over the age 40, in terms of things that are most likely to happen. Mm-hmm. But going back to your question, are all cancers related to lifestyle? Not all. Some are more strongly related. You mentioned the obvious ones. But there are things that, for example, prostate cancer and breast cancer, there are things that can increase your risk and there are things that can decrease your risk.
So that's part of your bespoke diagnosis when you're sitting down with patients looking at life longevity and what things you can do to prevent.
Okay, wait. We got to talk about Blue Wellth. Where did this name come from? It's not a spelling that's obvious to everyone. Let's walk people through that.
Sure. So Blue Wellth, you got two components there. You got the blue and the wealth. The wealth is spelled Wellth as opposed to the common spelling. So blue was inspired by blue zones. For your listeners who are not familiar with blue zones, these are places in the world that have the highest lived people, the highest percentage of nonagenarians, which are people who live to the age of 90, and centenarians over 100, and supercentenarians over 110. So these are pretty much, these are your subjects of interest, right? If you're trying to live a long life, and these are people who have not just lived long, but have lived long well, you know, they're healthy, they're happy, they're thriving. These are our subjects of interest. So there were initially 4 blue zones, and then a subsequent, another one was found in Costa Rica. So 5 total blue zones. So after learning about blue zones, I was very inspired. And after meeting Dan Buettner, who was a journalist who actually went to these areas and documented their lifestyles and really kind of brought this home for America. A number of books he's had. He actually was featured in a Netflix special. I don't know if you guys watched that. So that really was the inspiration behind Blue Zones. It's more like, it's kind of like how do we create our own individual blue zones? How do we create our collective blue zones? You know, if two of you decide that, hey, after talking to me, I want to focus on my longevity. You know, I notice you've got some Bowflex weights right by your office, right by your desk. You got the kettlebells. It's like, all right, you already have that space set up for yourself, but how can you support each other to create your individual blue zone community? How can everyone in this space do that? How do you bring that into your relationships? Because, you know, it's hard to do this in isolation. You need some support. Data does suggest that. So that's the blue part. And then the wealth, you know, the commonplace definition of wealth, we all know what that is, right? But the way that the twist on words is not just having, you know, it's more of having an abundance of well-being. It doesn't matter how much money we have in our lives. Once you lose your health, you know, all the money in the world is not going to get it back for you. It may help you restore some in terms of getting care, but once you lose your health, nothing else matters. So by cultivating an abundance of well-being, you really are more wealthy than anyone else.
All right, so we have a pool of listeners that's now crossed over 10,000 people that watch our episodes and stuff. Are there any like non-secret sauce longevity things that we could share with people at home?
Oh, definitely. Do you know what the number one contributor to disease is in our country?
Diet. Food.
You got it.
I mean, McDonald's?
Yeah.
Yeah, it's
Chipotle?
Maybe not Chipotle, but well, depends on what you're eating. But yeah, you're right. You hit the nail on the head. It's diet. It's the standard American diet. The acronym. Do you know what the acronym is for the standard American diet?
I don't know, the pyramid thing?
No.
SAD. Standard American diet.
Oh,
Sad
man.
diet. It literally does make you sad. Like, it's associated with higher rates of depression and anxiety. So we're literally eating our way to disease.
So what are some of the takeaways from that conversation? Is it too much carbs? Is it too much processed food, meat? What specifically?
Yes.
all of the above.
Yeah, it's a complicated discussion.
Yeah.
The easiest takeaway from here is going to be, if you're going to eat meat, it's got to be high quality meat. And if you're going to want to limit meat, then, you know, you really should lean towards more of a plant focus. as a bottom line, getting more plants, fruits and vegetables into your diet is a good thing. Swapping out meat for plant is a better thing.
So we can take this conversation two ways. We can talk about business. We can talk about science. Ankur's going to push this conversation more towards the marketing business side, but I'm really fascinated by this, the science aspect here. So when we talked about blue zones all across the world, is it possible to live to 110 or to have a blue zone in the United States, considering the environment that we're in?
Great question. There actually already is one.
What? So where?
Loma Linda, California.
Oh, wow. Cali.
Cali.
Yeah, clearly, we have to leave Jersey as soon as
Yes.
possible.
This comes up all the time.
I mean, I don't know if Springfield, New Jersey is going to be it.
That's not it.
But I'll tell you that. So what's interesting about Loma Linda is when you go right next door, I forget the city that's right next door. I don't know my geography as well, not being from Cali. But when you go right to the adjacent city, the mortality, the age range dips down to the average American. So just by being in the Loma Linda community, you're living a longer life.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
And what's the life expectancy in Loma Linda?
Yeah, so I forget the numbers off the top of my head. I think an average, and it also depends on your degree of vegetarianism. So the numbers for people who are mostly vegetarian, don't quote me on this, I think the average age is 83. And for those who are purely vegetarian, it's closer to 88 or so. And there's a difference in male and female.
Yeah. And in the U.S. average life expectancy?
78
Wow.
or so.
Okay.
Wait a second. Are you trying to say that being vegetarian will increase your chances to live to 100?
Yes.
That's depressing.
My wife is listening to this right now. This is going to be used against me
Yeah.
for sure. I married a vegetarian, and okay.
Yeah, so I'll add that it's not just being a vegetarian, it's being a whole food vegetarian. So I'll tell you, in college, I knew plenty of people who were vegetarian who's, kind of subsisted, what's the word I'm looking for, who were sustained on Doritos and like Cheetos. They're not going to live very long.
Yeah.
But eating full plants is probably the best way to go.
Depressing.
So you're saying no more Brazilian all-I-can-eat steakhouses?
No,
I'm not
Rodizio?
saying no more, but the more you can lean towards having less meat, the better. That being said, there's two components to lifespan. So we'll break that down. We've got to longevity. So you have lifespan, which is the number of years that we're on here. That's the most tangible definition. People think of longevity, think of life. But the other part is your health span, your quality of life, maintaining the number of years you have with the current quality of life, improved quality of life, or just the years you have without disability or disease. So the hard part here is treading along the balance of maintaining an adequate amount of protein intake to support muscle synthesis, but at the same time minimizing the amount of inflammation you're generating from eating animal-based food.
Okay, so eating well. So let's talk about the genetics part. How do you identify bad versus good genetics?
Good question. So I would kind of lean away from like bad genetics.
Yeah, gotcha.
Since that's not something we want to you're born with it, so there's nothing you can do about it. But in general, when it comes to longevity, only about 20, maybe max 30% is related to your genes. The remainder is based on your lifestyle.
So if you are someone who's been identified as having genetics that are not working for you, anything you have to work harder than the next person whose genetics are. Got it.
That's completely right.
Have you been identified as someone with
I
genetics?
think I identified myself, but is that something that's part of your like
It is, yeah.
intake process?
Yeah, so there's going to be some standard tests that we run, and depending on your history, if there's something that I suspect, then we might run some additional tests. So I'll give you a good example of where genetics can help and where it can make it hard. So there's a specific allele of a gene called the ApoE gene. The ApoE gene codes for a protein that's involved in a couple different things. It's involved in cardiac health. It's involved in risk of dementia, Alzheimer's disease, of one form of dementia. So for people who have a specific combination of alleles, it increases your lifetime risk significantly compared to someone who doesn't have that combination. So if we identify early on, let's say, like going back to your question is, when is it too early? If we identify that allele at age 65 versus age 45, then we have this opportunity for the younger person to really put into lifestyle changes over that course of time that can minimize the risk of accumulation of these plaques in your brain that cause a certain type of dementia. So we'd have to be even more strict with that person in terms of maintaining certain levels of cholesterol, for example, certain lifestyle changes, for example. If it's a woman, we need to be a little more careful around menopause in terms of hormonal changes that can can increase your risk as well.
Okay, so I feel like a lot of people at home have seen these documentaries, and I mean, if we were to poll 100 people, everyone's going to be like, yeah, I want to live longer, I want to live better. What do you think is the reason that people don't just do it, right? Because, I mean, for example, I know I'm not supposed to have mac and cheese from Wawa, but sometimes it's 2 a.m. at night and I'm working on a website and like Wawa's right there across the street and you're hungry. And the family thing is only $12.99, right? And I know I'm not supposed to eat, but like, I don't know, what is it that stops us from being better versions of ourselves?
I mean, human nature. It's taking the path of least resistance.
Yeah.
Yeah. And we crave carbs, that we're built that way.
So what I'm hearing is, Uncle, you don't have discipline. That's the problem.
Lack of discipline.
Well, if you're
Simple.
working at 2 a.m. and you see that, I mean, if I was working at 2 a.m. and I was hungry, I don't know how much discipline I've had either,
Well, that's another part of it too, right? So the culture, this whole grind culture, wake up at 5, work till midnight. That also is counterintuitive to, Blue Wellth, right? In terms of expanding and making your life longer.
I don't know. Hold on. I argue to that point, right? The idea is to grind for a handful of years.
Yeah, it never works that way.
So that the rest of your life, you can just enjoy and do all the things you're supposed to do.
That is true. That's the goal. That's
Right?
the goal. But
that's the American way.
yeah.
It's not necessarily the way that many populations will live.
So now to Ankur's point, you take one of the blue zones, these in Costa Rica. Is that, they're living to 100 years old, but are they billionaires? Are there millionaires in that?
For the most part, they're not. For the most part, the folks who are working in these places, now, most of these traditional blue zones, the exception is Loma Linda, and we can talk a bit more about that because that's probably more applicable to the audience here.
Yeah.
But when you look at these populations, whether it's in Costa Rica, whether it's in Greece, in Italy, or Japan, for the most part, they've been more socially isolated from other groups, based on geography or available resources potentially. So a lot of these folks are not wealthy per se in terms of having a lot of money, a lot of material possessions, but they're wealthy in terms of their relationships. Live off the land,
Got it. How important is sleep? I know a few years ago, was it Ariana Huffington's book, on sleep and the importance of sleep, and she studied millionaire executives and that whole thing about getting 3-4 hours sleep and how that led to them not living as long as others. How important is sleep to this equation? Because we talked about food and diet and exercise.
Yeah, it's a core component.
Okay.
It's a core component. There's many studies out there. Even being sleep deprived for even a week can increase your levels of certain markers of inflammation. I think there was a study that took people, had them sleep 5 hours for 7 days, and they found that their rates of motor vehicle accident is the same as being drunk or having all night, not sleeping all night.
Oh wow.
Yeah.
I'm gonna keep going. Well, this podcast is gonna be 2 hours if I keep. So you wanna jump in there, buddy?
I mean, I think I want to dig into the fact that there's probably an audience pool here who's very similar to me as a human being, right? We feel we have ambition, we have drive, we know how to disrupt, or at least we admire people who disrupt. How do you balance the desire to be healthy with the desire to accomplish something? Mm-hmm. Right? It almost feels like accomplishment always comes at self-sacrifice with health.
Yeah, good question. The easiest way I would answer that would be scheduling. To be super tight with your schedule. You know, depending on what school of thought you may adhere to, there's one guy named Cal Newport, and he suggests for maximum productivity and also for time of unwinding, you want to have every minute of your day scheduled. So, you know, I could pull up my calendar and tell you what I'm doing at 12:59 tomorrow because it's all scheduled out. And that's how we get everything done. But it's also not just scheduling work, it's also scheduling fitness. It's scheduling, it's as crazy as it sounds, it's like scheduling sleep, not actually putting sleep in your calendar, but saying, hey, after like whatever time you identify, 10, 11, 12 o'clock, whatever you need to do on your own, you are sleeping. Like you are not messing around on your phone. You're not doing anything else. You're just getting it done. And unwinding, like saying, I will go for a walk at this time. I will walk the dog at this time. Because we all, you know, we all work hard, right? We all, and at a default, work always takes over. When it comes down to, hey, should I, am I going to do this for my relationship? Am I going to do this for my kid? Or am I going to work? Like work just happens. It just takes over. And then what ends up happening at the end of, say, like you, to your point, you work hard now and then relax later. That point, that destination keeps on getting pushed off. Mm-hmm. I forget the name of the theory, but it's like, I think it's called the arrival hypothesis or arrival fallacy, that you feel like, hey, I'm going to work really hard. I'm going to get to this point. And once I get to that point, I'm going to be happy.
Yeah, then I relax.
Yeah, and that point just keeps on moving.
Yeah, there it comes.
Yeah.
So this is the idea that like you turn off you stop using your phone screens at 9 o'clock. You're in bed by 10. You wake up and do some meditation before you get to work and do some yoga, whatever the case is. To that point, what is your day like? A typical day for you, since this is obviously something you're passionate about. How do you live your life?
Yeah. So answer that in one sec, but I'll just get to Encore's point in one moment about folks who have ambition and want to do things but find it challenging to find time. There's a 3-to-1 return on exercise. So if you exercise for 20 minutes, you will live 60 minutes longer. That's the rough estimate. If you exercise intensely for 20 minutes, you probably would get closer to more of a 5 to 7-fold return on time.
Oh, wow.
So for those who say, I don't have time to exercise, it's really just saying, if you make this time, you will have more time.
Oh.
Yeah. But going back to your question about my typical day, it really has changed a lot since I was employed to be an entrepreneur, and it does depend on my workload. But in general, I'm in bed for at least 8 hours a night. And then my app tells me out of that 8 or so hours, I'm probably asleep 7.5 hours. So I'm getting good quality rest. I wake up in the morning. First thing I do is make my cup of coffee, get my wife's cup of coffee set ready for her. Last thing you want is a wife without coffee in the morning.
Last thing.
And then I just kind of come down. I look at my planner, and I've got this set list of things that I think about in the morning, first thing in the morning. And going back to the point of how work just takes over, it's so easy for us just to wake up and get to work.
Yeah.
Or wake up and consume some sort of media. But what I've learned from studying many of the greats is that, you know, once you give your attention away to someone, it's hard to get that back. So you wake up in the morning, you open your email, your time and your attention and your focus is controlled by that person. So the only time that I feel that I have that I can truly, completely control my attention and focus is right in the morning and right at night. And going back to the point of, you know, investing in the things that are right, I have this little checklist that I write every morning in my planner for the domains in my life that are important. So the first domain is family. Then I got wife, kid, home, finance, then business.
Okay.
Yeah. Well, I was going to get to that point. There's network. So, you know, definitely you guys would fall in that. And then I have business 1, business 2, business 3. Self and health. So it's a little complicated, but basically I put down one simple thing in each one of these domains. And if I accomplish this one simple thing in these domains, at least
in this day,
I will be happy. And it takes the focus away from this giant to-do list that we all have, that we all try to grind through or just push some things away. But by focusing initially on relationships, it reorients my day to say, all right, I can get enough done, but if I'm not present for my child, if I'm not giving my wife what she needs, my day is going to end up, not the way I want it to end up anyway.
Coffee is the first thing you do.
That's right.
Caffeine's not a problem.
Caffeine's not a problem. So coffee is probably the most consumed antioxidant in the American diet.
I cannot wait to get this little clip out, and then a month from now, when I just stop drinking so much coffee. You said that coffee was okay. Here's the clip. Then roll it back if you don't believe me.
Yeah. So coffee's fine in the morning. Coffee's probably okay, around noon or so. But everyone metabolizes caffeine a little differently. So the average half-life, depending on your metabolism, is somewhere between 6 to 8 hours. So if you have, and we're talking about this before the show, I'll have my last caffeine at around noon, and that typically is a green tea. So that caffeine, let's just take the example of coffee. Let's say you have coffee at 12. You take a standard coffee, which is like 100 milligrams, and then by 6 o'clock, it's 50 milligrams, and by midnight it's 25 milligrams. So it's okay. It's like taking 1/4 of a sip of coffee and trying to sleep. That's all right. But if you say I'm not going to have coffee at 6 p.m. and then try to sleep at midnight, then it's like taking half a cup of coffee and trying to put the lights out. There's going to be a lot of people that say, hey, I have no problem. I can fall asleep.
Yeah.
But when you look at the sleep waves, they're not getting the same rest.
Oh, interesting.
All right, so I think the most important part of today's discussion is going to be, how do we wake up America? And how do we wake up the people that are out there, struggling with that battle of ambition and accomplishment, and knowing that our health has got to be important at some point. All of us want good health. But how do we convince people? I know at Shreds, we would make this joke internally, right, where we're trying to sell a fat burner supplement to women, and to wake them up and shake them up out of the whole idea, it's like, hey, how much do you spend on your hair and your nails every month versus, going to the gym and getting supplements? What do you think the guy notices first? Is it your waist or is it your nails?
Yeah.
And immediately there would be this light bulb moment. And most of the women that we would talk to, that we were trying to sell these products to, and then all of a sudden it was significantly easier to have the conversation of what lifestyle changes they need to make and whatever else. How do we give that to these ambitious entrepreneurs that are in your avatar of who you're trying to get in front of and wake them up?
Yeah, that's a great question. There's going to be, an intellectual answer to that question and an emotional answer to that question. Right? The intellectual portion we mentioned is you can have all the money in the world, but if you don't have health, you have nothing. But really, when you say you want to live longer, who are you living longer for? Are you living longer for yourself? If you're alone, is that worth it? But most people who want to live longer, they think about other people.
Family, children, grandchildren.
Exactly. Family, grandchildren, family, children, grandchildren, even great-grandchildren, depending on how things are. But also thinking about conversations like this. I've known you, Encore, for more than half your life, and we're boys. And if you live longer, you'll be my boy longer. And having that depth of that relationship is incredible. So that's what it comes down to. It comes down to saying, all right, let's say someone today is, it's a little experiment I go through with people. This is kind of giving some intel into the process, but that's okay. So let's say you're 40 years old, and let's say you got a kid who's 5 years old. And let's say, you are a standard American, and you get sick, and let's say you live to, about 75 years old. So that's your kid, you die, and your kid is 40 years old. And let's say your kid had a kid at the same age you did. So you have a grandchild that's 5 years old. Think about how much time you have with, your relationship with your grandparents. Some people had a lot of time with grandparents, but many people didn't.
Mm-hmm.
They don't remember much about their grandparents. The amount of knowledge that your grandparent has is incredible. The amount of insight they'll have into your life is incredible, the influence they have. Imagine instead of dying at 75, you died at 85. That same kid now knows you to 15. You're able to influence their upbringing for 15 years. You're able to guide them as a trusted, resource, as counsel. When they're, the parents may not understand your kid, right? As a teenager, you can turn over to your grandparents. Your grandparents will tell you the truth. They got nothing to hold back, right? So, especially with, the crisis that teens are in these years, imagine what you can do for that kid. Now, let's say you invested early, and instead of 75, you got 95. You know that kid until 25 years old.
Yeah.
You saw them graduate high school. You saw them graduate college, and maybe even get their first boyfriend. Maybe even get their first girlfriend. Maybe even get married. Imagine that influence you have over that person. Imagine the depth of your relationship with your grandchild. But imagine even your own kid. Your kid, now you know your kid till 60 years old. That person's an old man already.
Yeah.
Or old woman. That's a deep relationship.
I'm getting emotional here. That's powerful. I mean, that's the sales pitch, I would imagine, right? When you're sitting down across the table from someone who's walked into Blue Wellth.
That's right.
I would also imagine part of the obstacle is science is under attack, has been under attack now for a few years. How do you battle that?
That's a good question. I think for the most part, the folks who are coming to me will understand that some of the things are going to be evidence-based and some of the things will be evidence-informed. There's the science behind longevity is not as clear-cut as many other things, right? So the problem with that is that if I wanted to say I want to give you the highest level knowledge that this particular substance, drug, intervention, exercise is going to make you live 35 years, I'll need to do a trial for 35 years and follow up, so you won't know. So if I wanted to be pure, I'd have to tell you what works for you 40 years from now. It's not going to work.
Right.
So for the most part, people kind of understand that this stuff it makes sense. It's not the purest of knowledge, but it kind of makes sense. Yeah.
What are you thinking about there, buddy?
I don't know if the emotional pitch is enough. Normally in marketing, I'll hear an emotional pitch and I'll be like, okay, I totally get it. I understand the emotional connection that men have to kids versus women having to kids and everything that happens there. But maybe it's because I don't have kids yet. Maybe that's part of why I'm like, I don't know if that emotional connection is enough. But I feel like there has to be a more intrinsic aha moment. I mean, I read about concepts like ikigai over in Japan, where everyone has a purpose, and that's their purpose for the rest of their life, right? If you're a fisherman, you're going to be the best fisherman, and you're just going to love doing it every single day. And that's like a major blue zone area, right? And those guys live on to be centurions and what have you. But then they were able to find accomplishment because the entire community established that you just doing this one job is more than enough for everyone, right? Versus over here in Western culture, essentially, even just going to a 9-to-5 and making X amount is never enough.
Never enough.
Right? And buying the car and buying the house is never enough.
No.
And then buying a bigger car and a bigger house is never enough because now you need a vacation home. And then you need 2-3 vacations in a year. And then when you go on vacation, economy's not enough. It's just never ending. And so then what is it that's going to make Americans realize, when I say Americans, I mean the Western culture, right? They realize that if you're going to prioritize your personal health, there has to be like a moment of like a milestone flag in the ground. Like from this moment onwards, this is a priority for me. And then how does that become a stronger priority than ambition or wants?
I think COVID helped with this mindset because, and just follow me here for a second. When COVID hit, a lot of the people that got sick had comorbidities, right? That was like a major aspect of the whole COVID thing. And so people started to realize that, oh yeah, the people that are dying and are getting sick also have diabetes, also had this, also had cancer. So, there was this big push, I think, after 2020 for people to get in shape and people to prioritize health and wellness to avoid having those comorbidities or what have you, to avoid getting sick if they did get COVID. Am I on the right track there? Am I making sense, or is that?
Yeah,
Did you notice that as well?
Yeah, I think you're making sense. So, as an oncologist, naturally, many of my clients now had cancer or worked in the cancer field. So that was the equivalent of having a rude awakening. If you're looking for something that's going to shock you into health, it's going to be a rude awakening. it's going to be something major or it could be something minor. But the fact that you live your life for a long time thinking you're bulletproof, and we're all in a place where we're all declining, right? So something's going to happen at some point. You're like, oh, I'm not 25 anymore. I actually have to take care of myself. I need to have a primary care doctor. I need to get checked out because I haven't done that for a long time.
Let's switch gears real quick to market. You have a question?
The title of Manuj's book, We're Not Bulletproof.
That's great.
I like that.
By Dr. Agarwal. Coming out later this year from
That's
AT&T
great.
Publishing.
I like it.
We just launched a new business, AKG Publishing.
No, that's an interesting point, right? Humans are not bulletproof. And how do you shake people up? You have to explain to them that you have to have that aha moment. Everyone's going to have something different that makes them realize that they're not bulletproof. I mean, people live from check to check, right? Even entrepreneurs from check to check,
Yes.
or from client check to client check. And I mean, what happens when there's a cash flow calamity, right? A parent passes away, a car accident, any one of those types of things. And all of a sudden, your cash flow that you thought you had a system for is all just like totally shaken up and ruined. I mean, maybe that's it. You just have to scare everyone into realizing that their health is important.
People have different motivations, right? Some people will thrive on the negative feedback and the scare techniques. It's just like parenting, right? You have negative reinforcement and positive reinforcement. Some people will thrive on different forms. You just got to find the right sauce for the right person.
Blue Wellth is a business that's kind of emerging now because of the Blue Zone concept. I'm sure you're not the only Blue longevity-focused business operating in Pennsylvania even, right? Mm-hmm. How is the business going? Let's talk about how long you've been in business under Blue Wellth. I know you have multiple businesses, also an oncologist. How long has Blue Wellth been around, and how's business going?
So Blue Wellth has been around for less than 40 days.
40
days? Yeah, so January 1st was the official launch date per the IRS.
Congratulations.
But of course, I was building it well before that.
Yeah.
So it's been in practice for that period of time. I have initial bolus of clients, so I'm very pleased with that. And overall, things are going well. As a newly minted entrepreneur, there's definitely a lot to learn.
Yeah.
And I'm never going to stop learning. And I'm glad that that you guys are putting together these resources to help entrepreneurs. I think it's going to be amazing for so many people.
Yeah.
I'm looking forward to benefiting, and I'm sure that you're going to touch a lot of different lives.
I mean, hopefully we can touch as many lives as you touch. In terms of the business, 40 days old, how many people are in your organization? Is it just you and a secretary, a receptionist? Like, do you have other doctors in your practice?
So no other doctors in the practice, just
Okay.
me. I do have a health coach that I work with. So I'm trying to keep it lean in the beginning. So we have contractors. The health coach is a contractor. I have a manual therapy person who's a contractor.
Okay.
But a lot of the stuff, talking about results of COVID, one of the very few blessings of COVID was the acceptance of telemedicine. So that's opened up a lot of doors to a lot more flexible work. So my platform is that ideally, my clients I want to see in person initially. For someone who's a stranger, having that face-to-face time is great for creating a relationship, and after that, it can continue face-to-face or it can be all virtual. So as a result, it's very easy to kind of have these touch points, asynchronously. So with that, the footprint's very small. I do have a physical office that I sublease from a co-working space.
So ultimately, the goal is to grow this Blue Wellth. Are you looking to open up multiple locations at some point? Is that the long-term vision?
So going back to what you were saying, there's a lot of people in this space. And I feel that, rising tide raises all ships.
Mm-hmm.
So in the end, I don't necessarily think that I want my business to be the one on the golden mountaintop because, your time on that top is very limited. So I have a group of people that kind of network with each other. And the vision would be in a couple of years, potentially creating something together on a national scale.
Okay. Is there a target demographic for your ideal client? Is it the 25-year-old that eats McDonald's every day? Is it a 65-year-old that has already had hip replacement surgery or something like that? Obviously, when we're talking about longevity, it's mostly preventative. So are people waiting till it's too late, or are you trying to get people early? Is that the focus of the push?
Yeah, good question. I would say the target demographic probably would be someone who's, at the very least in the upper 30s, maybe or so. And then the top, it really shouldn't be much of a top, but in general, once you get to your 70s or so, that's probably, or even upper 70s, depending on how you live your life, the benefit of these interventions might be a little less. That being said, it's largely preventative, but it's also about early detection also.
Yeah.
So I think the magic sauce here is that what people like me don't know, we don't know, right? And then we need to be held accountable for the changes, and it has to be from someone that we respect. And so you, with your career and everything that you've done, it's hard not to respect you when you're telling us that we need to do something. So if we understand, your ideal avatar is someone who's willing to invest in their personal health and start that journey with you, how long do you think someone needs to be on that type of journey before you're like, okay, you're good now, like you can go leave the nest and see what happens?
Yeah. So my program is an annual program. At the end of the year, you have the option of staying on in a different fashion, more of kind of like an attorney has a retainer agreement, just being available as counsel, having low touch points, depending on your progress. So if someone's made a lot of progress, and that's both subjective and objective, they feel better, they look better, and the numbers look better, then hey, maybe you can continue what you're doing and you don't necessarily need me as much, But everyone's a bit different. Some people need a little more hand-holding. Some people want that. Like you mentioned, accountability. Some people need that accountability going forward, and I can provide that. And some other people don't need that. And I say, great, I've done my work. I'm here for you if you need me. Take care.
And in terms of the time commitment that you expect from a client, whether it's going to be doctor's visits, whether it's going to be testings, or, I mean, obviously we don't need to talk about your packages here, but it's never just the packages, right? Like you might need to get a monitor that's looking at your blood glucose levels. You might need to get a gym membership. Planet Fitness is $9.99 a month, right? Versus Lifetime, that's $250 a month. That's the two gyms that Ludwig and I go to. You're an LA Fitness guy, right?
Actually, I'm in no gym right now. We have a gym in a complex.
Oh, free gym. Okay, look at that. But I mean, what other things do people need to potentially invest in when they're starting a journey like this?
Yeah, so there's going to be things that I really do highly recommend, and there'll be some things that are kind of optional add-ons. So imaging, some baseline imaging is probably a good idea, especially if you're thinking about screening for certain cancers, depending on your age. There'll be certain things that might be standard, but I might want to bring up a little earlier. So for example, in the US, we start doing colonoscopies at age 45, but that is it's a kind of a cost benefit analysis to pick that age. So as a society, there are going to be people who are diagnosed with colon cancer before age 45. Largest demographic is 40 to 45. So I personally want to have colonoscopies done earlier at age 40 to pick up that 5% of the population that could die of colon cancer beforehand. But going back to your question, making time for exercise, and it'll be something that we would schedule. We'd look at your time and see how much you can commit, and then we'd break that down into the different components that constitute exercise. Nutrition, would actually come up with a nutrition plan depending on goals, depending on preferences. And then we have the health coaching. The health coaching can be, the minimal commitment would be once a month for the health coaching, but there's, it's unlimited depending on how much coaching you need.
Is this expensive? Is this covered by insurance?
Good question.
Does it help reduce insurance costs if you have a membership or a membership to Blue Wellth?
Yeah. So it's, for the large part, they're not covered. Longevity medicine, preventative care as a whole is hard to get covered by insurance.
Yeah.
The model, fee-for-service model that we have in American healthcare is essentially, it monetizes procedures, it monetizes sickness. So we won't necessarily pay to prevent you from getting cancer. We'll pay for your cancer. And we won't pay for you to prevent a recurrence, but we'll treat your recurrence. So most things are not covered. There'll be some things that can be covered. So I'll try my best to get certain, for example, certain labs, try to get as much done with your in-network, lab location as possible. But there'll be some advanced labs that they may not cover either. So the longevity program can be expensive. Longevity doesn't itself have to be expensive, meaning the actual interventions like, hey, live healthy, doesn't have to necessarily be an expensive intervention, but the testing can get expensive. And of course, access to coaching, access to a physician, that's expensive.
Yeah. Okay. So, I mean, some of us just need to commit, right? That's the bottom line. And that was so cute that we said it at the same time. But honestly, it's just the truth, right? Some of us just need to make that commitment towards our health and understand that the decisions that we make now compound for the rest of our life. And the sooner that we try to activate those blue zones or blue zone lifestyles, the larger it is that we have an opportunity, or the more likely it is that we have an opportunity to potentially get to know grandkids.
Definitely.
Maybe even great grandkids.
Mm-hmm. Essentially, it's just ask yourself, what am I living for? And
what's the priority?
What's my priorities, and how do I get more of that?
So let's talk about this journey. 40 days in, how's the response been from your support circles? Or are they like, oh my God, Manuj, what are you doing? I can't believe you stopped practicing and you're doing this whole business thing. The whole idea of being a doctor, engineer, computer programmer is so big in ethnic cultures. Like all of a sudden now you're a business owner. How are people feeling about that?
Yeah, good question. So when I left Penn, I intentionally didn't tell people what I was doing. I didn't want to have the conversation around you worked so hard to get to this point. What are you doing? In general, being a radiation oncologist is you live a comfortable lifestyle, and many people could ask, or even some have asked, like, why would you leave that? You're leaving a good salary, and what are you doing? And at some point, I just decided it's not worth having the same conversations with people who are not aware of why I'm doing things and who know me that well. I think for folks who knew me well, they're like, man, this is amazing. Like, this is what you've lived for such a long time, and now you're actually making it into a business that's incredible. So those are the people that I chose to tell.
So you transitioned from being on the maintenance / care side to the preventative side, essentially, is what you're saying. Mm-hmm. You saw a need to try to attack this problem before it happens. So instead of seeing patients after it's too late, probably you're helping them get out of the situation where they would be facing having to deal with their cancer. That's awesome. I mean, it sounds like it's just the right thing to say, the right thing to do. I mean, that's kudos to you for identifying that and then obviously turning that into a lifelong passion and then turning that into a business. A lot of people don't make the leap into starting their own business and becoming entrepreneurs. It's too scary, So congrats and kudos to you on that. When did you make the decision to start a new business, and when did the 40 days start? Like, how long was this journey?
So it was last summer.
Okay.
That I decided that I think I've had enough. And it was kind of a couple of things coming together at once. It was feeling like I wanted to be an entrepreneur. It was also, healthcare is burning people out left and right. And it was getting to a point where I was getting pretty burned out. The expectations were mounting, and there was no balance of work-life. And I don't like that term anyway, work-life balance, because work always wins. The seesaw is always tipped over. So I felt like I wasn't present at home. I was not, the happiest at work, and I wasn't able to exercise my passions. I really wanted to help people beyond what I was already doing. And the healthcare institution, this is not just my former institution, but as a whole, has turned into this productivity machine. And the goal is to kind of push as many patients through as possible. And like any other business, you want to have a higher volume with the least amount of cost. And I just didn't feel like that was good for patient care. So that that all kind of came together in the summer when I made the decision to leave, and I've never looked back since.
That's awesome.
So how can people at home learn more about you or Blue Wellth? Like, where do they need to go?
Yes, my website is available, bluewellth.com, wealth.com would be the best place to go to learn more about the business.
And are you on any social media platforms?
You're going to have to help me out with that. I'm a bit old
Okay.
school.
Okay, we're going to figure that out. Because, I mean, at the end of the day, America needs to be woken up about the different topics and longevity. And
Yes.
I mean, that place in California can't be the only one in America. We have to figure that out, right?
There are some places that I've heard about that are trying to build their own blue zones. So interestingly enough, Dan Buettner, the gentleman I mentioned who studied the blue zones, he had an experiment. He went to a Midwest town, and this is documented in that Netflix special. He went to a Midwest town, essentially created a blue zone in the middle of America, and showed that they're able to create this with the right support from institutions.
I gotta watch this Netflix special.
It's incredible, man. Thank you for coming on the podcast. How was it?
This is fun.
Yeah,
it's different.
I want to do some more.
Appreciate it, man. Listen, I learned a lot, and I think, after today, I'm definitely making a life change, getting back into the gym and changing diet, definitely.
I can't
So
wait to see it.
Yeah, I'm happy to help you out.
Appreciate it, man.
All right, guys. Thanks for tuning in, and we'll catch you guys on the next episode.